Right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out this evening. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about a little project I did. As they say in open source software, you have an itch, scratch it. I had an itch, so this is how I scratched it. This is Spaminator. It's a simple IMAP mail filter. This is a treatise on spam. I don't like spam. That's all you need to know about it. And for those of you who are not old enough to get this, this is Monty Python. This is actually the original sketch for where the term for unsolicited email came from, being called spam. Because there's a bunch of Vikings over here that keep singing spam, 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 spam. So anyway, that's where this comes from. So. All right. So why did I do this? I don't like spam. I do love Thunderbird, but I hate to say bad things about especially open source stuff because it's volunteers. But unfortunately, their junk filtering is just busted. Either that or giving them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe I've just copied my profile for too many decades over and over and over to new computers and new versions. I don't know. But all I know, for me, the junk filtering did not work at all. It was supposed to be trainable, and I don't know if any of you have used it, but just didn't work. I mean, it would catch stuff that wasn't spam repeatedly, that I told it wasn't spam. And I mean, like emails from me to myself, it's like you would think that would be easy for it to learn. That's not spam, but no, didn't work. Okay, obviously Spam Assassin would be, if you were just asking around to, just open source people, what do I do about spam if I'm running my own mail server? Oh yeah, which by the way, I am running my own mail server, so that's part of the reason for this. I did look into it, and I'm just barely competent enough to run my own mail server and make sure it's not an open relay. And that's it. That's all I really want to do. I don't want to become a mail admin expert. And I tried looking at Spam Assassin. I was like, this looks like there's a high likelihood I'm going to break my mail server if I start doing this because I don't know what I'm doing. So I was like, I want something else. It's got to be easy to train. I used a tool way back in the day, which had basically, it would run on, it was actually written in Perl. I don't even know if it's still around, and I forgot what it was called, but it would run as a process, basically a proxy on your local machine. But this was down back when I didn't have my own mail server. I was doing POP, but basically you would fetch your mail through that, and then it would, mark it as spam based on the training it. But training it wasn't terribly convenient because you had to open up the web interface and, do different things with it. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but I like things to be really, really simple. This has turned out to be accurate and, very importantly, low false positives. I think I've only had like 2 or 3 false positives in the several months that I've been running it. And again, very few false negatives. The false where it misses spam is usually because it's a brand new spam message that it's never seen before. Although it actually does catch most of the spam messages that it hasn't seen before either. Most of those it catches. Every once in a while one slips through. But because it's so easy to train, it's not a big deal when that happens either way. So, all right, before I get into the code, I was trying to think of how to demo this, but I couldn't really think of a good way without a whole lot of work on my part setting up fake email accounts and junk like that, because I didn't want to expose any of my private emails, not to mention compromise the privacy of anyone who sends me email. Not to mention, you guys all know what email looks like, so it's not terribly exciting. You got it, your inbox. Basically, the way I set it up was I've got my normal account, user account, and then I created a Spaminator account. You don't have to do it that way. You could actually just create a spam and a ham folder on your user's account. But of course, because I didn't know what I was doing at the time when I wrote this, I wanted to be ultra safe and create a separate account, which I had a test inbox, which I could copy emails into. And I didn't care if I lost them. I'd just copy them back over again. So I was just being paranoid because I really didn't want to destroy my main mailbox for obvious reasons. So anyway, that being said, I should also mention too, even though I called it Spaminator, that's what it's for, what I use it for. It actually can also be used as just a generic filter. So you could filter your mail by any sort of settings. All you need to do is create a new folder for each category that it basically how you train it is, like I said, I've got a Spaminator account, and under that account, I've got two folders. I've got one called ham, I've got one called spam. And for those of you that are not as familiar with the term ham, that means email I want to get. Spam is email I don't want to get, and they just call ham email I want to get. So basically, yes, exactly. I like ham, don't like spam. So all I have to do with Thunderbird is just, if I get a new spam that didn't get filtered, I just literally copy it into that spam folder. And then I wait, because I've got this running on a cron, and then it comes through and the spam's gone, in a few minutes. And that's how I know that it's working, is I don't actually manually move it. I just literally copy it. What's nice is Thunderbird also has a redo your last action thing. So if your last action was to copy to the spam folder, I don't even have to do that much. I just right click on the email, say copy to spam again. Boom, I'm done. That's why I wanted to do this, because it was so easy to train. It's literally just copying emails into the correct folders. So yeah, and waiting for it to run on cron. And the nice thing is too, since it's IMAP, I don't even actually have this running on the mail server box. I have it running on my development machine, just because I figured why not. And it just logs in and it does all this stuff remotely. So that's what's the other thing that's nice about it, is it also works well with IMAP servers that you don't have any control over. You can, if you can log into it, you can use this program to do this for you. So anyways, any questions on that so far? Does it kind of make sense how the training works and everything? Okay. Like I said, I wish I had a visual, but I wasn't sure I'd be able to access my email from here. And like I said, a whole bunch of privacy reasons and junk like that. I just didn't feel like doing it. So let's start looking at the code. Basically, we've got two different pieces of the code. This is the program that basically reads the ham and the spam folder and loads it into a format that then the other program, which is actually the Spaminator, reads those files and figures out how to filter it. So this is the thing that reads the emails, creates the data, and it's, when you see how it works, it's dead simple. This is definitely not over-engineered in any sense of the word. Maybe it's under-engineered, I don't know, but it's pretty much just enough. So literally, what I've got here, obviously, I'm using a whole lot of stuff. I'll talk more about the modules as I get down to them. Line 13, you're going to see this in a lot of the programs commented out, this is just a nice thing to know that if you're dealing with basically any of the higher level modules that use in encryption, SSL, this is great to know, which I actually learned. You can turn on the debugging level, and then you can actually, have some idea other than, oh, it won't log in, because when you're going through SSL, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. So this is basically, I've got my spam and my ham, and they're literally just two text files that I am going to data dump a structure into. And then the other program's just going to read that in and eval it. That's literally how these two things communicate. It's very simple. And again, this is running on a cron slightly more frequently than the Spaminator itself, because I want to make sure that every time the Spaminator runs, it's, got pretty close to the up-to-date filtering that I've set up. So, I will show you that. I've got examples, which now you make me glad that I actually did that, because I wasn't going to do that at first. So yeah, I'll hold on to that question, and I'll get to that later. So basically, you just create a new net IMAP client object. Obviously, I've changed the names here. It's not server, and my password's not password, but that's right. That's right. It might actually be password. Don't try to hack my server, please. Okay, so basically then it'll die if it can't connect for whatever reason. And then it will attempt to log in using the credentials there and give you an error if it can't do that. And then this is where we start to get into the meat, terrible pun, of the program. So basically, it goes through the data structure up there that just has the keys, ham and spam, and the files. So it just loops through that hash. It's a hash because I wanted names, and I don't care what order it does them in. It really doesn't matter. So I do an IMAP select on the mailbox name, which conveniently are the names of the keys, spam and ham. Like I said, those two folders. So the capitalization does matter in this case because it matches the names of the folders. So if you did them in all lowercase, you would want to have those in all lowercase. So I did end up learning quite a bit about IMAP. I'm by no means an IMAP expert, but I didn't even realize there's a whole query language behind IMAP. That's why you can do, all the different sorting things you can do and some of the filtering and selective stuff you can do. I'm not doing a whole lot of fancy stuff, but I'll show you a few of the things that I learned. Selecting is one of them. Literally, there is like a select command that says I'm using, just like when you're using a database, you tell it which database to use. You're telling it which mailbox I want to use. And then in this case, I want to search all because in my ham and spam folders, there's not a ton of email. And obviously I want to get all of them. And I don't intend that will ever get large enough to be a big problem. So I'm just saying, give me all the message IDs. And then I'm just creating a variable called corpus, just because, corpus just meaning a body of words, text, that I'm using it in that sense because I'm actually doing some very, very, very light language processing stuff on it as well. So then I say for each message ID, and then I set up my query. Like I said, that's literally, if you were like telnetted in or just, logged into an IMAP server, you could type these commands and it would actually do stuff. So I'm saying I want, as part of the body, all I really want are header fields, and specifically I want the subject. So then email subject is just fetching with the message ID. And so basically the message ID tells it what record to fetch, which is an email, right? The query is what information do you pull out of that. So basically I pass it the message ID, I pass it the query, and then I'm just cleaning up some junk, because obviously, especially with spam, you get all kinds of just garbage where they don't format their emails correctly and stuff like that. So I'm filtering off new lines and carriage returns off the end of subjects, because sometimes it'll have one or both. And then basically I'm adding in the subject, because that's part of the email that I care about, right? In fact, in some cases, that's a huge part, where you've got the important words that, mortgage, whatever, might be in the subject. And it's like, usually that's spam. Okay, then basically you've got sections of the body that you can get. So 1.1 is like the first section. You notice I commented should be text, because it's supposed to be text. It isn't always text. Sometimes it'll be HTML. Usually, though, if you get a multi-part message, the first part should be just the plain text, and then the second part will be like the HTML. And then if you have any like images attached, those will be base64 encoded and a whole bunch of garbage. Or it'll just point out to images off of a web server. But in this case, it's just easier. I want the text. That's what I care about. I don't care about HTML or images or whatever. And then I also learned the hard way that I had to wrap this in an eval, because as I try to decode the body, sometimes it isn't actually encoded like the standard calls for it to be. So if it's not encoded, I just take it as it is. That means it's already decoded. It's just regular text. If it is encoded, then I decode it using email MIME encodings decode. Everybody okay with this so far? Any questions? Okay, good. All right. So this is it. We're at the end of this file here. So basically what it does is I set up a word weight hash, and then for each word I go through and I force it to lowercase, obviously, because I want it standardized. I could have done uppercase. Doesn't really matter. Just want it standardized in some way. Of the corpus. And next, if exists stop words, that was one of the modules I used. So stop words, when you're doing natural language processing or NLP, which I almost shouldn't say I'm doing that, because I really am not. I'm using some of the tools. Stop words are like a and the, just any trivial words that really are just noise. Those are not words that are going to help you figure out whether or not this is spam. Yeah, I mean, there are tons of them, but that's what's great about that module is I don't have to worry about what are common stop words. It's got, some sort of standard set of stop words. So I just say, yeah, skip it if it's a stop word. So then otherwise it hits the next line, and it basically puts the word in as a key and then increments it. Now, there's a specific reason why I'm doing that. Basically, it's just counting how many times has this word appeared. I need that because I'll get into more of that later, but this is basically using Bayesian filtering. And the module that uses that, that's basically the information it wants, is it wants a word and it wants how many times did that word appear. So that's why I called this word weight, because obviously if the more times a word appears, the more weight it's given, so the higher count. And then you can see, literally, I wasn't lying. I did dumper. If you guys are confused by this syntax, I'm just writing it out. I'm using IOL because I like it a lot. So I don't have to do an open and blah, blah, blah. It just overloads the greater than sign, and it just writes it out to the file. So that's it for that. Any questions before I move on to the next? So again, just to give you a brief recap, this thing logs into the IMAP server, looks at the spam folder, fetches all the messages, gets all the words out of it, goes through the ham folder, fetches all the messages, gets all the words from it. Yes. The subject and the body. And the body. Yeah. That's the part where I said that should be text in the body, but sometimes it's not. And actually, again, if I actually should have done some checks in here to see if it's HTML and then actually parse it and parse out the text. But as it turned out, it works pretty well without doing that. So I was just like, whatever. I actually, in the original one, I had a to-do in here, to-do check for HTML and parse it, but ended up that it works great without it, so I don't worry about it. Right. Any other questions? Yes. Spam, yeah, exactly. This is basically the programmer that's acting as the trainer. It's reading what I've told it. This stuff is good, this stuff is bad. Just go through and process it and make it available in a format that the actual mail filter can use. So now I'll actually get to your question. So this obviously is way longer. I chopped this out just to give you an idea of, and let me go back. Yeah, the first one, this is spam, basically. So there's a lot of weird stuff, just like numbers. Sometimes they only appear once. But, just little things like this is actually, you can tell, is pulling out of the HTML. But anyways, there's a pretty high correlation that if that appears, that it's probably spam. Yeah. So let's see. I moved some of the, basically I also massaged this a little bit. I grabbed some of the really high ones from the middle. Yeah. Oysters? I have no idea what, but you've seen those spams that are just full of just, garbage words. Yeah. So that's oysters. I don't know, but there it is. Make, again, I don't know, but very, very high correlation. But that's what's great about this is I don't have to know. All this stuff figures it out for me. And God bless all you guys on CPAN that make all these great modules so that I don't have to figure this stuff out. I just look at it. So I'll show you what the ham one looks like. And again, I just picked kind of a MSO. I have no idea why, but that's extremely high. Dinner, I have a feeling I know where that one comes from because I meet with some friends once a month to have dinner, so that's probably where that comes from. I've been outed as a game collector, Steam powered, so obviously those are for games that are on sale. I want to get those emails, even though I shouldn't. Curse you, Steam and Gabe N for making me collect more programs than I'll ever be able to play in my lifetime. Obviously, Perl and Mongers, I was surprised. That's why I put Mongers up there, I was surprised that there was only one up there. But obviously, Perl, there's a pretty high correlation that that's going to be an email I want to get. And that's what's amazing, though, is just the fact that I don't have to put a ton of emails in either the ham or the spam folder. And it, does a really good job like that. I mean, basically, it was mostly, I did most of the training, up front. And then once I do that, it's like maybe once a week or once every other week, I've got a false positive or a false negative, and I just copy it over and it disappears the next time it's run on cron, and I don't have to worry about it. So, any questions there? And again, remember, this is a specific format. This is a word weight. It's the word and the number of times that it occurs across all emails in that mailbox. Make sense to everybody? Okay. Okay. Anyways, this is the song the Vikings sing. And actually, to digress, because I'm going to finish way early. The whole reason that they used that sketch in particular and the word spam in particular, was that what would happen is in the sketch, every time spam was mentioned, all these Vikings would start singing the spam song, and spam, 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 basically drowning out everything else that was going on. There's your analogy. That's basically what happens with spam, is it drowns out everything you actually want to be hearing. And of course, because a lot of geeks like Monty Python. So there you go. So there, you can amaze and impress your friends with that trivia. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, actually, I can do that. All right, so now we're going to look at the Spaminator itself. You'll notice, again, a lot of these are the same modules. Here I am actually parsing the HTML, and I'll get to that in a second. And again, my debug for when I was debugging. What I have allowed myself here is I can pass in on the command line a date to go back to. So for instance, if for whatever reason I'm on vacation and my dev box goes down and this hasn't run in a week, I can tell it to go back in a week, and it'll just filter everything from the last week to right now. But most of the time I don't use that, but that's an option just in case and it was useful for testing too. I was able to mess around with how far I wanted to go back and, see which messages got grabbed and which ones didn't. So again, if you're confused by the IO and this is just IO all. Basically, I'm just saying, read this in. This is like a slurp. It's just basically taking in everything, the contents of the file, putting it into this scalar, and then I eval it, just like I said. So now, this is the data structure you just saw and on the other two. And then this is doing the same thing for the ham. Don't need to belabor that. If I wanted to, I could have done some sort of loop, but I guess there are only two of them, so I like it a lot. It really, it saves a lot of typing. Yeah, and it actually, well, if you're interested, I did a presentation, I know at some point. It's up on YouTube on IOL, yeah, because I love that module. It's one of my favorites. And it's such a generic one that anytime you're using IO, I end up using it pretty much, unless I'm restricted for some reason. So, line 29. This is where we are getting to the meat of this part of the module. So I create a new naive Bayes object. And I've got some information at the end if you want to understand how this works. I'm not going to go into that at all. Just know that by creating those data structures, I can pass it to this object, and this object is then smart enough to figure out, is it more probable that this is spam, or is it more probable that this is ham? Or, like I said, you could, again, spam and ham are arbitrary. So you could have, like if you had Jira tickets, you could have Jira as a Jira folder and train it. Anytime you see something that looks like a Jira ticket, put it in this folder. Obviously, most email clients, you could do a lot of that just filtering on the subject. So that's probably not a great example, but there are other things that may be more complicated where the subject line is not consistent in some way, but it would, grab all of the email once you've trained it and put it into any number of categories you want. So just so happens I'm just using 2. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand this is not just for spam, it's for categorization in general. It just so happens that I'm using it for spam. So I add an instance, and the attributes are that data structure, and then I give it a label. And you see line 30 and 31, I do the same thing to both. And then boom, I say train. That's it. Now we're off to the races. So we, once again, get our handy IMAP client. And once again, log in. You notice here, I'm actually saying Spaminator IMAP because, again, I created it as a separate account, but you don't have to. You can, and in fact, actually, the beauty is it could actually be a completely different IMAP server. You could put them, you could go from one extreme to the other. You could have them under the same user account as folders under that user. You can have them on the same server under a different account like I did, which again, there's no real design decision of why I did it that way. I just didn't want to clobber my mail while I was experimenting. So that's why I did it this way. But this would actually work perfectly fine if it was 2 different IMAP servers. You could have it reading off of one. I don't know why you'd want to, but you could. So that's the other thing I like about it. It's really flexible. As long as it's an IMAP server, this will work. So I'm using date time, and then my default is basically I just go through yesterday. So obviously I'm repeatedly looking at some emails that I've already looked at before, but not enough to make any difference. I mean, it's nice and snappy. I just wanted to pick something where I wouldn't miss any, so I figured, well, I'll just look at everything from yesterday to the present time. So that's what I'm doing here. You notice I'm selecting inbox now because I actually wanted to filter my inbox. And this is why I was so paranoid, because this is my real inbox. So I'm running a search. And again, this is another IMAP query. And I just say since date, and the date has got to be in the DDMMMYYY format, which means 2-digit day, 3-letter month, and then 4-digit year. And I put on there not deleted, because obviously, why do I want to filter deleted email? Because I don't know. Oh, I should probably explain that for people that don't know. When you delete your email, it's kind of like deleting a file in some ways. On IMAP, it's not actually deleted. It's not gone. It's just removed it from the index. It's still in the file, and it's just got a flag on it that's marked deleted. So that way your email client knows, don't show me that. And it'll, copy it over to like your trash or whatever, but it'll still be in your inbox, just marked as deletion. That's why if you've ever seen the compact option, that will actually delete it. If you compact the folder, that's what it does. It goes through and it just shrinks it down, gets rid of everything that's deleted. Then it's actually gone. Up until that point, it's still there. And if I didn't put that not deleted on there, which I, of course, learned the hard way, I was like, I'm getting all these deleted emails. And so I also have a handy link to the IMAP spec because I actually did read that to figure this junk out. So, all right. So basically what this query does is it just says, give me all my emails since yesterday. So again, it works with message IDs. So I get the message IDs. Right here, what I'm doing is I'm storing all the flags on all the messages because you'll see later I restore those. The reason why is because this program will mark all your emails as read because it read them, right? It went through them. And obviously, I don't want that to happen, though, because then I go and look and I go, what have I read and what haven't I read? So that's what I'm doing is I'm just keeping a copy of whatever the flags are before I process any of the messages. And then at the end, I go put the flags back the way they were. So it'll mark things as unread again, which that's the primary flag I care about. You know, there are other flags, but that's the reason I did that. So here I'm looking for the from. I'm doing a from query, so I say body header dot fields, the from field, and then I'm pulling out from, and again I'm filtering it because there's all kinds of garbage in there. People don't follow the standard. Or the great thing about standards is there's so many to choose from, but actually in this case there's not. There's one. So I grab again the subject, which you saw in the other program, and I grab the 1.1, the body again, which I could have that comment in here again that this should be text. But if it's not text, here I did, and again, this is, you can tell how lazy I was because I could literally basically copy this code into the other program. But basically, I filter out things like, I don't want the word subject. That's just noise, right? That wouldn't be a normal stop word, but in this case, it's obviously just noise because every email is going to have subject in it. So I filter that out. I filter out from, because obviously all of them are going to have a from. So now I go through, and again, I'm processing my inbox mail the same way that I did with the other one. That's why I'm kind of breezing through this, is because this code is almost identical to what was happening in the other program. I'm going through, I'm ignoring stop words, and I'm creating, again, word weights. But this is now my inbox word weights. And I already earlier handled the word weights for ham and spam. Now this is inbox. So now what I do is I hand off to my Bayesian object, predict, and the attributes are the word weights of the corpus of my inbox, basically over the last day to this very moment. And then I just, to make things convenient on myself, I turn it from, a decimal into an actual full percentage, because it comes out as a fractional number. So I just multiply it by 100. And then I don't care about precision here, so I just truncate it to an int. And then basically this is where I'm resetting my flags again. Remember flags from way back up there? This is saying go back and apply all those flags back the way they were. And here is where all the action happens. And you can tell this is really not that hard code. Again, this is kind of was a heuristic thing. I just played around with this until I felt pretty good. 75% seemed to work pretty well for me. I didn't want to go 100% or 99%, although I found as I was debugging, I was printing out all this debugging information, and a lot of the stuff when it predicted, it was like 99% certain in a lot of cases, or 100% certain. But just to give myself a little leeway, I'm saying if it's at least 75% certain that it's a spam, then I do an IMAP copy. Unfortunately, there's no move, so you actually have to do a copy. And the junk folder is, again, that's a Thunderbird convention, so I don't know. Other ones just, have spam or whatever, but Thunderbird's convention is it has a junk folder. And then I say delete the message out of the inbox. Remember, all it's doing is actually just marking that flag as deleted. And then we just go back and loop through again through every message. So, any questions? Good catch. Unfortunately, I was cleaning up some things where I noticed where in debugging I cared about it, and I put some stuff in, and then I tore out the debugging, but then I left a few places. So you're right. I don't actually use that anywhere, so I need to tear that out. So good catch. Because I did do that. As I mentioned, I kind of crammed on this one, so I was literally this morning, I was going through the code and going, oh, I don't need that anymore. That was debugging. Sure. Which line? Oh, I think that's up further, yeah. Oh, yeah, basically, well, no, I'm sorry. You're right, I don't. Yeah, because in this case, since I'm only doing 2, the default is if it's not spam, it's got to be ham, right? If I were doing multiple categories, you're absolutely right. Then I would want to do more complicated logic here, where I actually check, is it this thing? Is it that thing? Is it, something else? So most likely what would happen is the default case would be if it doesn't match the percentage I sent for any of the categories, let's say I've got 10 categories, it'll just leave it in my inbox because it doesn't know what to do with it, or it's something that I didn't particularly want to filter and I wanted it in my inbox. So you're absolutely right. In this case, though, the default is I know if it's not spam, it's ham. So, and that's literally what it does. If it's not spam, it just skips over the message and leaves it in the inbox and doesn't do anything with it. So, which is exactly the behavior I want. Yeah. Oh, yes, I do. I do have, yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes, I do. Yes. Yes. So again, yeah, if I had my 10 categories, each label I set up would be there. And you could use those to set up like an if-else tree just to whatever. Yeah, exactly. You can do it that way. And again, you can, you could take this and very easily modify it to, do other things without much work at all. But I actually remembered I wrote one more program. I had a request for this from someone who will remain nameless because he didn't show up. But he actually requested that I write this program. So I wrote this program because he actually wants to use this for his own spam filtering. But he said it'd be really cool if it also had a program that did this. And I'm going to explain what this is. So you can see this one's a lot simpler because all it's doing is it's logging into the IMAP server. I'm using the same default date of yesterday, and it's selecting the junk folder. And all it's doing is says since date not deleted, and the in square brackets date means sort by date. If you wanted the opposite sort, you would put a little caret in front of the D in date. That's just a little IMAP trivia for you. But in this case, I want it actually sorted by date. So what this does is just grabs the email subjects. And again, this isn't different than any of the other code you've seen. I back up my flags because, again, it's reading the mailbox, so I have to restore those at the end. But all it's doing is going through, and it's just looking at what are all the subjects in my junk folder since yesterday. And you could set this up on a cron to run at midnight or something. And then the next day, you go in and look, or actually you probably wouldn't want to do that. You'd more want to set it up just before you check your email in the morning, have it run. It'll send yourself an email. Yeah, just that's literally all it does is say, these are all the subjects, so you can really quick look through those and go, yeah, that all looks like spam. I can ignore it. There's nothing urgent that I missed that, went in there. So he asked me for that, and it does work. I don't have much of a demo of it because, of course, it's not that interesting. It's literally just an email with the list of subjects. Yeah, exactly. Oysters, whatever. So, any questions on that? This is really just a simpler version of everything else we've been doing. All right. So, if you really want to understand how all this stuff works, I've got a link to the Wikipedia page on spam filtering, but it also has links to the generic Bayesian filtering and how you can use it for all different types of things, and the actual RFC for the IMAP protocol, which I did actually read in order to figure out how to do the queries. So not the whole thing, just the parts I needed to read. I'm not that bored. So anyway, any questions over all of that? All right, thanks for coming.